Hi, my name is Holly. I'm a manager here at Edison Ford Winter Estates, and here we are at JetBlue Stadium, the current spring training home of the Boston Red Sox. There's so much to say about the Red Sox that I can't fit it all in, but I'll try to do the highlights of spring training. And unfortunately, I can't do all the stuff at Fenway Park, but maybe another time. And thank you for joining me. I am a Red Sox fan, but more importantly, I am a baseball fan, though my favorite team is the Red Sox, but I promise to represent them all. 1901, they were known as the Boston Americans, and they were formed as chartered members of the New American League, and there they are. And the team was established to compete with the Boston Bean Eaters, the Boston Nationals, the Boston Braves. And after 1886, that team was also affiliated with the name the Red Sox, but they dropped it and they were known as Boston Baseball Association, a name that had been used since its inception on January 20th, 1871. And it was around this time that the press started to refer to the team as the Braves during the 1912 season. And sometimes they were called the Nationals, and then they were the Braves again, and then they were the Bean Eaters. There was a lot going on. Their first ballpark for the Red Sox, the Boston Americans, was, let's go back, the Huntington Avenue Grounds, and that was the host to the first American League National League World Series. It had the deepest center field in the major league, a pitcher's oasis, which helped Cy Young throw the first perfect game there on May 5th, 1904. And that site of that park is now part of Northeastern University. In 1993, they put a statue of Cy Young there where the pitcher's mound and home plate used to be located. And they were demolished after the Red Sox left at the beginning of 1912 to play at Fenway Park. And the Cabot Center, an indoor athletic site belonging to Northeastern University, has stood on the Huntington Fairgrounds since 1954. They were demolished after the Red Sox left, but there are those things that you could go seek out and find at Northeastern, and there's a little picture of it. And so that was between 1901 and 1911, so 12 years, and its capacity was 11,500, which is closer to a modern spring training site as it is today. And something has happened to me, so you can't see me in the upper corner, but I think that's still fine. The team met for the first time at South Station in Boston in March 1901, and they boarded a train headed to Charlottesville, Virginia for spring training. Now, spring training during that time went from place to place, and actually it doesn't settle until after World War II. And there wasn't often other teams to play. The first score for the Boston Americans was a 13-0 victory over the University of Virginia. And, today they play Northeastern. They used to play Northeastern and Boston. So they continued that tradition to this day, just a different college or university. During the next 5 seasons, the team chose Georgia for its spring training. And after completing their successful first season, the Americans picked Augusta, Georgia. And I think you know what takes place there involving golf for their 1902 headquarters. The following season, the team moved their training camp to Macon, Georgia. And those first 2 years, the National League wasn't very happy about the American League being around, so there's no World Series. But in 1903, the Boston Americans won the first World Series ever played, and they decided to remain in Macon for spring training through 1906 because, doggone, they were doing so well. And there's a picture of the Boston American League team in 1902. Skipping ahead a little bit, the Boston Americans had their 7th season in 1907, and they're in Little Rock, Hot Springs. The Americans finished 7th, not a good record, even though we didn't have East, West, and Central divisions. Still being in 7th is not something to be proud of. In the American League, with a record of 59 wins and 90 losses, and oh my goodness, 32 and a half games behind the Detroit Tigers for all you Tigers fans. And I know we have a lot of Midwesterners that visit here. Including spring training, the team had 5 different managers that year. 5. In March, the team held spring training in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1907 and 1908, and then in Hot Springs from 1909 to 1910. During spring training, player manager Chuck Stahl died by suicide. And it's a tragic story. And he said, I was going to read you a little bit about it. He had been a player for the team, and then they appointed him manager in 1906, and he tried to quit as manager after the team had broken camp in Hot Springs and began its barnstorming north. And this is from the book Under the March Sun, which goes through spring training in Grapefruit League and some in the Cactus League to 2009. And to continue, Stahl did not want to be a manager. He tried to quit, and the owner persuaded him to stay on until a replacement could be found. But a day later, on March 28th, when the team was in West Baden, Indiana, Stahl drank a bottle of carbolic acid, which sounds absolutely horrific. He'd been given to treat a bruise on his foot. Newspapers reported that his last words to teammate Robert Unglaub were, the pressure of the manager's job drove me to it. And if you want to look up him, there's all kinds of drama because his wife dies shortly a year later. He was taking care of his elderly mother. There's all kinds of suppositions about how his wife ended up, but really a tragic story all the way around. And going through that many managers in one season, I think probably might have been a record. I didn't check it out. The Americans became the Red Sox during the 1907 season, and after 2 years of spring training in Little Rock, the Red Sox switched to Hot Springs. Spring training was low budget in the early years. After the 1908 camp, the team decided to pay for their expenses by leaving behind an extra outfielder to play for the Little Rock minor league team that season. Fortunately, the team maintained an option for the player's future service because that extra outfielder was Tris Speaker. Speaker was a star for the Red Sox from 1909 to 1915 and was elected to the Hall of Fame. And I think he was with the Athletics for 1 year, his last year of his career. And he had a 22-year major league career. And to be in the Hall of Fame is a pretty big deal. Most baseball players never make it there. In 1909, the training moved to Hot Springs, Arkansas. And that's where President Franklin Roosevelt used to like to visit many years later. And Hot Springs is a site of underground thermal springs with temperature at a consistent 147 degrees, the oldest park in the National Park System. Hot Springs was the spring training headquarters of many major league clubs, and the Red Sox stayed in Hot Springs for 2 years and then moved to Redondo Beach, California for spring training in 1911. And that was close to the winter home of the team owner, John I. Taylor. This was the only spring that the Red Sox trained in California. Can you imagine going from place to place and you don't even always have another team to play? And then the team returned to Hot Springs before the next season and won its second World Series in 1912. The team remained in Hot Springs through the 1918 preseason, and during their 7 years there, the Red Sox won 4 World Series championships. So I guess it was their good luck charm. And if you look at this picture here, you can see I kind of cut off some of it, but the 4th from the left to the 3rd from the right in the first row, that's Babe Ruth. In 1915, Babe Ruth got his start with the Red Sox as a pitcher, but he was lobbying the manager. So he started out as a pitcher, remember, to let him bat as well. And today, when Shohei Ohtani was batting and pitching, that was a really big deal. He didn't get to pitch last year, but so remember, Babe Ruth is not just a pitcher, he becomes a hitter as well. And in 1918, Ruth hit a ball so deep that no one knew how far it went for almost a century. This was at spring training. The story goes it landed in a gator-infested pond in the Arkansas alligator farm. In March 2011, the CEO of the Hot Springs National Park Convention and Visitors Bureau hired a firm named B&F Engineering to investigate that legendary homer. Luckily, the Gator Farm was still there and the pond was as well. Using archival and modern photography, B&F was able to determine the location of the home plate, allowing them to measure the home run at an amazing 573 feet, one of the longest in baseball history. And just as an aside, on April 20th, 1912, there's Fenway Park under construction, and realize that this has got to fit into a city block. It's, didn't have a wide open space, and it's in the Fens area, which is where a lot of the artsy areas are too, and museums, but they had to bring in a lot of fill. And if you've ever been to Fenway Park, by the way, some of the seats don't face home plate. But it is the oldest ballpark around. And here's another little story about Babe Ruth. Tampa, Hot Springs, Texas, and New Orleans, and from 1919 to 1927. In 1919, the Sox came to Florida for the first time. John McGraw, the New York Giants, who recognized that emerging star Babe Ruth would draw fans to their exhibition games. He enticed the Red Sox to come there. And he hit another home run that was over 500 feet. And there's a plaque near the spot where the ball landed, recognize it's today. And that was the only year I believe they were in Tampa. It says Babe's longest homer at Tampa Plant Field on April 4th, 1919. Babe Ruth, playing for the Boston Red Sox against the New York Giants, smacked a 587-foot home run that set a record in a preseason game. 4,300 screaming fans saw the feat. Famed evangelist Billy Sunday, an ex-major leaguer himself, that's until I read this, I didn't know he was, or I forgot, who was conducting a tent revival on the Florida Fairgrounds nearby, had pitched the first ball of the game, and the Bambino's pace-setting ball was presented to him. I bet he would have liked to keep it. Who knows? Ruth played from 1915 to 1935 and is regarded as the most popular player and the greatest slugger in history. One year he hit 60 homers, and I'll leave that up to you to determine who's the greatest slugger. But by 1919, the Red Sox were finishing sixth in the American League, and the team decided to return to Hot Springs, hoping the proximity to the thermal springs would return that good luck. Remember all those World Series they won? Unfortunately, the magic had vanished, and so had the baby. He had gone to the Yankees. The team finished no higher than fifth place following the next 4 spring training camps in Hot Springs. Thinking a total change of scenery might change things, the team spent their only spring training in Texas before the 1924 season. I just think, how can you be consistent if you don't have a completely developed ballpark and you're going from place to place, you're nomads all the time? And this was just a 7th place finish at that time, and was the best the team could muster after trading near the Alamo in San Antonio. The team headed to New Orleans, Louisiana in 1925. And that year they finished 9th. This is so awful. 49 and a half games behind the American League pennant-winning Washington Senators, and they will become the Minnesota Twins, the team I spoke about last month. Things got tougher for the team in 1926 and 1927. They finished last both years. In 1928, the Red Sox returned to Florida, to Bradenton. And so people are dabbling and coming to Florida, but it's not yet consistent. And yes, we are long-suffering Red Sox fans, but we love our team. Okay, by 1928, Florida had become the favored location for Major League spring training. 10 of the teams trained in Florida in 1928, and the Grapefruit League was underway. And yes, there's all kinds of stories about how that came about. One was that I think it was somebody hired them to drop baseballs on the East Coast, and actually they couldn't find any, so they threw down grapefruit, and that's how the name came about. We can thank Al Lang, Northerner and baseball fanatic, who was headed to Fort Myers, but instead stopped in St. Pete for getting teams to come to Florida. And so he got teams to come to St. Pete. And by the way, that has had more World Series winners than any other place, but they are not active. They no longer have a spring training team. And right now, unfortunately for them, because of the loss of their stadium for Tampa Bay, they don't have a baseball team as well. Anyway, for the Red Sox, 2 seasons at Bradenton, and the Red Sox had 2 more last place finishes. But today you'll find the Pirates there. They went there in 1969 and they still train there today. The Red Sox moved to Pensacola, Florida for spring training in 1930 and 1931, and the team finished 8th and 6th and moved their spring training headquarters to Savannah, Georgia in 1932. And they finished in last place, 64. And if you ever think a team is bad, listen to this. They were 64 games behind the New York Yankees. The total attendance at Fenway Park that year in 1932 was 268,715 fans. And if you figure half of those are home games, I didn't even want to do the math on that one. So, Sarasota, 1933 to 1942, a division there because of World War II, and then 1946 to 1958. They were there a very long time with a very basic field. In 1932, the current owner, Bob Quinn, had to borrow against his life insurance policy to fund the team's new spring training home in Sarasota. And Sarasota was pretty beloved. Tom Yawkey, who owned the Red Sox for many years, and then his wife owned it in a trust with a couple of other people, agreed to buy the Red Sox from Quinn, and a new era began. And there's a whole bunch of things that went on with the Yawkey name later on, but that's not the focus of spring training. So that would be another discussion for another day. In 1933, Sarasota, Florida was a small village of 2,500 citizens. And Red Sox Hall of Fame second baseman Bobby Doerr attended his first spring training camp with the team in 1937. And he remembered Sarasota fondly. It was a great place to train, said Doerr. It was, if you remember in the early years, that once you left the small town area, it was just open land, miles and miles of palmetto grass with nothing to build it on. Old, and it was called Payne Park, wasn't much to speak of. It wouldn't begin to compare to today's parks. But there I was, an 18-year-old, 3,000 miles from home, and I'm playing ball with guys like Jimmy Fox and Lefty Grove. What a thrill. And I cited where I got that information from. And Ted Williams is escorted. His contract is bought from the minor league San Diego Padres team at that point. And he's arriving at his first spring training camp. He's escorted by Bobby Doerr, who took him to the Red Sox clubhouse at spring training to meet manager Joe Cronin, who is also in the Baseball Hall of Fame and also in the Red Sox Hall of Fame. And he said, I remember like it was yesterday, said Doerr, recall from his Oregon home in a 2012 interview. I introduced him, and Ted's greeting to Cronin was, hi, sport. I think I knew at that moment that Ted would spend the 1938 season at AAA Minneapolis, which he did. But I think, he just needed that practice, but only for 1 year. And that was beginning of his relationship with the Boston Red Sox. And it was an association that lasted for over 60 years, an affiliation that would define the man in the sport. And often Ted Williams was the biggest story of spring training. And that Ted Williams said that he said about him, there goes Ted Williams, the greatest hitter who ever lived. And yes, he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame today. And he became very good friends. Other people would join them. So it's Bobby Doerr, Don DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio was with the Yankees. Don DiMaggio, who's called the Little Professor, and Johnny Pesky, who was beloved by Red Sox fans everywhere. And he joined a few years later. But these 4 guys became very close, very tight. And there's a book written about them called Teammates by David Halberstam. And I highly recommend it. And I could talk about Ted Williams all day. I have to, my full disclosure is that my late brother's middle name was Theodore after Ted Williams. That was my dad's favorite player. Ted Williams had a relationship with the press that had developed after a couple of years that wasn't always fond, but Ted Williams was an amazing player. He also was an amazing supporter of the Jimmy Fund. And maybe it was a little controversial, but he defined the Red Sox, in my opinion, and it stayed with them through, I believe, 1961. But would have to double check on that. But he was a part of Sarasota. He would go off and fishing. He could hit with power. He could do all kinds of things. And there he is as a young man. And I kind of repeated myself. Man, what happened there? And we're going to go back to this. I don't know what's going on. Um, he'd been purchased from the San Diego Padres, a minor league team, when he first joined the Red Sox in 1938. The Sarasota Herald, in a 3-page article, said, "Boost the Red Sox," and observed that 19-year-old Ted Williams was assigned number 16. 2 weeks later, the paper reported that he had been sent to the Minneapolis Millers in Daytona Beach, but then he's going to join the Red Sox at Payne Park. And if you know the Red Sox, you know his number is 9. And the Herald soon quoted manager Joe Cronin, "Ted Williams looked mighty good today. He's just a kid, and his kind often makes the best ball players." And so for the next 3 years, he quickly climbed to the heights of baseball stardom, and he hit 406 in 1941. And he actually had a 399 and a half batting average when he did his last at bat. So he could have easily had it go down, or he could have kept it and if he batted, it could have gone down, but he kept it and just rounded it up. He could have kept it and rounded it up, but he didn't. He was successful, and it made it to 406. Well, there's a division here. It's something breaks up spring training from 1943 to 1945. Train lines were moving troops across the country. Resources had to be conserved, and teams were told they could not go south. So teams had to find training sites north of the Ohio and Potomac and east of the Mississippi River. The St. Louis Cardinals and Browns were the exceptions, so they were allowed to remain west of the Mississippi to train near home in Missouri. The Red Sox trained at Tufts University in 1943, and in 44, the team headed further south to Baltimore in Oriole Park, and in 1945, they were in Pleasantville, New Jersey at Ainsley Field. And the 1943 Red Sox lost several players to the military during World War II, and the team's record was dropping way below 500. Among the departed players was the team star Ted Williams, though he did appear at the ballpark in 1943 as a member of Babe Ruth's Service All-Stars. And it was a little controversial because he was a supporter of his mother, but it was criticized because he was going to be deferred and then he wasn't. And so then he assigned the Naval Reserve. And in the fall, the Red Boston and the Yanks went 1-3 at Fenway Park in their first year as the Boston Yanks at the NFL. And on November 4th, Franklin Delano Roosevelt came to Fenway Park and gave the final campaign speech of his career just 3 days before being reelected for his 4th term. By the way, he went to a lot of Senators' games. And so there was the Boston Yanks. That was a football team there. I thought I was talking about the Red Sox and the Yankees. And unfortunately, the Red Sox missed a chance to improve their team when they gave Jackie Robinson and 2 other African-American players on April 1945 a tryout at Fenway Park, but decided not to pursue any opportunity any further. And you know that Robinson would courageously break the major league color barrier 2 years later with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and Major League Baseball's color barrier for the Red Sox. They don't break it till 1959 with Pumpsie Green. Not unfortunately that they got him, that they didn't do it sooner. With World War II nearing an end, Fenway hosted a Here's Your Infantry show on Independence Day. So there's he being sworn into the Naval Reserve. He did a lot of training stateside, and he was in Hawaii when the war ended. Because he was headed to the Pacific. So he lost several years of his career. And did you know this? The Red Sox were part of the Cactus League. I knew that briefly. But when the Red Sox arrived in Scottsdale in 1959, they became the fourth member of the Cactus League. The Indians were still in Tucson, and the Giants had moved from New York to San Francisco in 1958, continued their spring training in Phoenix. And the other Cactus League member was the Chicago Cubs. So we had a kind of a lopsided Cactus League. And the Cubs had moved to Mesa, Arizona in 1952 after spending 24 years training on Catalina Island off the coast of Southern California. And I don't know who they played there. Arizona offered Major League Baseball teams consistently good weather. In March, the average maximum temperature is 75 degrees, and it was guaranteed almost sunshine all the time with little rain because they get 3/4 of an inch in March. Well, this year we have not gotten much rain, so it has not affected spring training so much. And then they leave there. So remember, Cactus League for 7 years. But here we are in Winter Haven, where they are for 23 years at the Chain of Lakes Park that had a capacity of 7,000. Well, prior to the 1966 season, the Boston Red Sox relocated their spring training headquarters to Winter Haven, Florida. Winter Haven was a Central Florida community of about 20,000. I think it has 45,000, located between Orlando and Tampa. Winter Haven had some baseball history and had been the spring training headquarters for the Philadelphia Phillies between 1928 to 1937. Before the arrival of the Red Sox, you know what Winter Haven was known as? The home of Cypress Gardens. And that's before all the amusement parks were around. It was a theme park, and it had lush gardens and animals, water skiing shows, and it was established in 1936. And it was recognized as Florida's oldest tourist attraction. And elements today are incorporated within Legoland, which is within that area as well. And I can't say for sure, I haven't seen him, but I'm guessing that might be because this is from Florida Memory Project. That might be, it did not identify him, but I'm thinking it might be George Scott, the Red Sox first baseman at that point. And by the way, there were lots of things going on at Winter Haven. There was always some excitement. There was a fight with between Jim Rice and somebody else over a parking space, which he arrived late for a morning game in Lakeland, and this is from the book Under the March Sun, and grabbed this parking space reserved nearest the locker room, and it was reserved for PR Vice President Bill Crowley. Rice made the bus, but when he saw Rice's yellow Cadillac in his spot, he found his reserve for Bill Crowley's side in the grass and an adjacent orange grove, and he never shrank from an argument. Crowley, a World War II bomber pilot, got to Lakeland later that morning. He found Rice in the batting cage and started giving him, they said, the what for, and they scuffled, and Crowley's hand was bloody. And by the way, people love drama, and the writers, I guess, loved this drama, and it was all about a parking space. There also was some bad things, really bad things, because there were many places where Black players were not allowed still in the 60s and 70s. Service in a restaurant, passes to the Elks Lodge Club that were given to Black players. Really horrible, terrible, discriminatory things that were done because of things in the area, and the Red Sox, unfortunately, did not stand up. And by the way, they finally terminated their relationship with the Elks Club, but it took a long time because of the treatment of the Black players, the racism that should never, ever be tolerated. And then there was the Wade Boggs story, where Wade Boggs was having an affair, and he said he had an addiction to sex. And Wade Boggs is a Hall of Famer today. He was with the Red Sox, he was with the Yankees, and I think his last year he was with Tampa. So obviously these people, Red Sox players, are very human and make some pretty major, things that we might think are pretty terrible. Racism, absolutely no. And just other stories that happen that make it into the paper. So no tolerance for racism, nor should it have ever been tolerated by the Red Sox. But there's always interpersonal drama in players' private lives that get picked up by the press as well. But then there are people, and by the way, the one thing I didn't say about Ted Williams, he always supported the Jimmy Fund, which works with the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which raises money for children with cancer. And that was started with Ted Williams. And he did go there outside of having the press see him. There's always spring training stories, by the way. Well, the Red Sox leave Winter Haven after 23 years. That park was getting a little worn down, but actually the Indians lost their future spring training home to a hurricane, and they stayed there for a number of years. And of course, today they're known as the Cleveland Guardians. So what happens here? Well, we know the Twins came here at Terry Park was getting outdated, though it is still used today. We have a vintage baseball game this coming Saturday, the 22nd of March, 2025 at Terry Park at 11 o'clock, old-fashioned baseball. But the park had kind of gotten worn out. In 1991, the Twins got a stadium, Hammond Stadium, and City of Palms, 1993 for the Red Sox. This stadium was built for them. It happens to be my favorite stadium. City of Palms Park had a capacity of about 7,800, including standing room, and it was popular with fans from the start. And look at all the palms around it. There was just some special magic, in my opinion, around it. During their first spring training season in Fort Myers in 1993, the Boston Red Sox averaged 6,400 fans per game, about 50% more than their final year in Winter Haven. Attendance at City of Palms Park grew steadily over the years. And in 2023 through 2011, the team recorded 109 consecutive sellouts for the Grapefruit League contest. And that is City of Palms. It doesn't quite look like that today. It's kind of gotten a little run down because there's not occupied for a while. It was used by Florida Southwestern. And now it just kind of looks abandoned and lonely. And let me tell you a little bit. There's a few games, a couple of pictures that I took with not a very good camera, I think, at the time, but it did have a very special magic to it. Let me go back here because I want to tell you a little bit about it. Part of the problem with the City of Palms is that the practice fields were about 3 miles down the road. The minor leaguers were there, and to practice, you had to bus the team down. And then fans like to watch practices, and I encourage you to go next year to the ones that JetBlue, even if it's just when pitchers and catchers are there, because a lot of the position players show up, and there's just a lot of people there, and some of the former Red Sox players as well will be there. So that was a major problem. There was not a lot of parking. You had to park and pay to park in people's driveways and things like that. I think there was a bigger hope that the area would become more developed. But I have to say that I enjoyed being there, and the Red Sox were there and won 2 World Series in 2004 and 2008. When they were there, they had David Ortiz playing there, among other players. Let's see, I think Eckersley played there some. We know that Pedro was there, Nomar Garciaparra, before he was traded. And so they were going to leave. The Red Sox were going to leave. They were going to go to Sarasota. And I was thinking about we might move to Sarasota because I wanted to be near my team, but thankfully they didn't leave. I mean, and I am a believer that they bring and the Twins. We have two teams. How fortunate are we? They bring a lot of money into our economy, and we have fun. And you get to be closer to the players, and you get to watch their practices. And so this is a picture I took of Fenway South, 2012 to the present. Go to a game if you haven't been to one, by the way. JetBlue Stadium at Fenway South. There's the old scoreboard that has to be, you have to take a ladder to change the score. It was in storage. This was originally at Fenway Park itself. I wish I'd taken more of it. You can see when I took this picture in 2019. There's Wally with me in 1997. And yes, Wally's up at Fenway, but he also goes to the spring training games. And there's also Tessie as well that will appear out there. And people love their picture taken with the mascots. And it makes it a lot of fun, I think, for kids, but for the young at heart as well. And just to give you an idea of some of the players you can see, unfortunately, Mookie Betts went to the Dodgers, a sore spot in my life. Dustin Pedroia, who had his knees ruined when somebody, namely Manny Machado, slid into him. Ortiz, Hanley Ramirez, Pablo Sandoval, Xander Bogaerts, Clay Buchholz, just lots of different people. And they do play the Twins a lot because we're in the same area. And this was at a practice session. And I should have put in, I had one of Pedro there, and I meant to put one in of the great Louis Tiant because he would be there as well. And he passed away this past year. An amazing pitcher and gentleman, in my opinion, belonged in the Hall of Fame. But these were some of the pitchers that were practicing. That's Matt Barnes. Well, the Red Sox have had 14 World Series appearances, which is the same as American League pennants. World Series titles. There are 9, 1903, 12, 15, 16, 18. Oh, 2004, 2007. And those last two, 13 and 18, those were at JetBlue. And we're due for another one. American League pennants, they're same as appearances. As I read them, I read them to you. American League East Division titles, 1975, 86, 88, 90, 95, 2007, 13, 16, 17, 18. American League Division Series 2003, 4, 7, 8, 13, 18, and 21. 7 of them in wild card 8, 1998, 99, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2008, 2009, and 2021 American League. And I got to see the Red Sox in 2018, their first game of the division series, a postseason game. And the seats weren't that great, but I was there. I thought we were going to lose it, but we won. Hallelujah. And then in 2021, I got to be up there to see them win the game that would put them to the American League Division Series. And then I saw them win one game, but then they ultimately lost after that. But nobody expected that run in 2021. But we are expecting great things in the future because they've got some new players and some up and coming rookies you got to check out. And here's so it's trading sites, and this stops at 2003, but it goes on. You know that they go 1993 to 2011 at City of Palms, in 2012 to present Fort Myers, but that kind of breaks down the different places they went. And what I forgot to tell you was after World War II, that's when they started going to more consistent sites, because you can see they're in Sarasota for quite a while, 7 years in Scottsdale, and then they're in Winter Haven for 23 years. And now look how long they've been around in this area. And I urge you to go to a spring training game. It is so much fun. You're going to say it's a lot of money, but it creates a memory. And there are places where you can spread a blanket and sit and watch there, which works if you're not me, because I would never be able to get up. But spring training attendance, this is from 2024. And this is just the Grapefruit League. It doesn't include the Cactus League, and that's Florida Sports Foundation. That's the average per game. So we're in third place there. 8,653 in total attendance, 129,801. Twins right behind us. I think we dropped. It used to be we were the number one, but we haven't won a World Series for a while. I think we drop quite a bit if you mix in the Cactus League with it. These are my sites, even though Under the March Sun does not go to past 2009. Here we are again. Here I am. I don't know what happened to me before. It is a really good book. You can still get it, can still buy it. There's lots of great websites. And next month, if you go to our calendar in April, we have a couple things coming up. One about the fort in Fort Myers. And I'm going to be doing about women in baseball. There's only one woman in the Hall of Fame. There's all those women that played. A league of their own isn't just fantasy. There's women that played during World War II. There's one woman in the Hall of Fame. There's so much that we can learn about and discover. And thank you, Maxine and Dwayne, for your comments about me and the mascot, and me talking about this is my beloved team. So if I showed my love to them, I hope you understand. You never know what's going to happen, why I lost my video of myself, but I'm okay with that. Thank you for your patience. Check out next month's digital discussion and Step into History Digital Edition. I am the third Tuesday of the month, and Isaac will be talking about the fort, I think the second Wednesday of the month. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next month.